I've been blessed to be to have found Justin Rasmussen. He has made my life so much easier. He is not only a great associate, he's a team player, he works well, and he's come from a commercial real estate background. And with that, he walked into this business, and it hasn't taken him very long to just shoot forward and take off. So with that, I'd like to pass the podium on to Justin Rasmussen.
Okay, today I would like to talk about multifamily investment on the Palouse. In particular, I'd like to talk about student housing. So 2016 across the nation was a record year for student housing investment, with $8.9 billion being invested nationally. And by all indications, 2017 looks to be another record-setting year, as national and international appetite for this investment class remains extremely high. So I'd like to approach this from two positions. First, I want to talk about demand, and in particular two trends that are kind of pushing this demand forward. One being the demand for updated housing stock across the U.S., and two being demographic drivers, in particular two demographic drivers that have pushed the demand forward. And then I'm going to talk about the supply side, how much inventory has been brought onto the market, and how has that inventory affected occupancy and rental rates. So first, let's talk about the demand for updated housing stock. So many of the residence halls across the U.S. on campuses were built in the 1960s and 70s as the boomers began to roll out to college. And those, of course, had a very different format from what modern students are looking for today. So the big question is, well, what are they looking for? The comment I've heard frequently from parents is spoiled and entitled. But what they are looking for is plenty of Wi-Fi, and this is the first one that we always get whenever we send out questionnaires. They want lots of Wi-Fi that needs to be plentiful and easy to access. And they are demanding on-site fitness centers and exercise rooms. While they will utilize the university's facilities, they are very much demanding that these be brought closer to them in their living space. They're asking for common area study spaces as well. So while they will utilize the university as a study space, they very much would like to have that study space brought closer to them in their living environment. Single bathrooms, this is a big one. The days where students are happy to share, a single bathroom for a floor of dorms are gone. Students are looking to have their own bathroom, or maybe share a bathroom with maybe one other person. So swimming pools, when practical. And then proximity to the central business district. This is a big one. So a lot of modern students want to be located near an urban environment. They want to be able to participate not only in life on campus, but they want to be able to go to downtown and have ample eating opportunities, nightclubs, bars, and that kind of thing. So proximity to central business district is a big driver for a lot of the student housing development. So let's talk about demographics. As we all know, the wave of millennials coming in and obtaining their education has been a large driver pushing development. From 2000 to 2014, we saw a 31% increase in enrollment across the United States. Now that's a trend that we expect to continue, not at the same rate, but moving forward by 2025, we expect there to be about 19.8 million students enrolled. So another demographic driver for universities has been international students. We've seen an increase of 41% in enrollment for international students from 2009 to 2015. And in 2016, we crossed the 1 million threshold of international students enrolled in the United States. So this is a trend that's very much expected to continue. International students are a great profit center for universities, and universities are actively seeking to recruit international students to the U.S. Now, one potential headwind to this trend is, of course, immigration reform. So no matter where you stand politically, there is potential for immigration reform to dramatically affect the number of international students coming to the United States, either directly through legislation or through perception. If these students begin to view the United States no longer as a place that's safe or somewhere they want to be to receive their education, we could see a serious headwind with international students depending on where we move with immigration reform. So let's talk about inventory. We have this strong demand, and it's been present since the early 2000s moving forward. So how good a job has the market done of meeting that demand? Well, developers delivered a total of 49,000 beds in 2015. 2016, and that's 2.2% higher than 2015. So that we expect this year a little bit less, and we're seeing a general plateau in the number of beds being delivered across the country, which is something I'll get into in just a minute. But in 2017, we expect there to be 45,700 new beds delivered onto the market. So if we look at the year-over-year delivery, you can see that there was a peak in 2013 and 14. Matter of fact, the trend started really in 2011. You started to see a strong uptick in beds being delivered with that peak in 2014. And then what we've seen since that time is a plateau throughout the market. So we haven't seen a decline. The difference between the lead up to 2008 was that in 2008 we hit a strong peak about 2007 and then a sharp decline. Well, what we've seen this time around is a sharp increase starting in 2011 and then a nice gentle plateau moving through after 2014. Now, our market tends to lag the national market somewhat, generally by about 3 to 5 years. So with the number of projects that we have coming on board, we expect 2018 through 2020 to be essentially like our 2012 through 2014. So as we've already discussed, Bill and Pete and Carrie Jo did a great job discussing some of the student housing projects we have coming. So in Moscow, of course, we have Identity on Main, the Bloom Properties development in Indian Hills, Merrill Properties Phase 2 on White Avenue, and then North Star Development's purchase of Farm Road. And we have more to come. We are currently working with several buyers, developers that are at different stages, either having properties under contract or are actively shopping the market to start new projects. So in Pullman, we've seen much the same thing with Evolve on Main, the New Hills property project on Terraview, and of course the Corporate Point project with WSU. And in Pullman there again, we do have several active buyers either with properties under contract or are currently shopping to start new projects as well. So how has all of this new inventory affected vacancy rates? Well, the number of new beds that were delivered in 2015 and 16 were absorbed very quickly into the market, so much so that the overall vacancy rate has barely moved. Typically, the national vacancy rate sits between 6 and 5%, and we're currently sitting at about 5%. So supply is doing a very good job at this point of keeping pace with demand. We're very much not in a situation nationally where we've presented an oversupply in any way. So here on the Palouse, if we look at vacancy rates in 2017 for Moscow, 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms sit well below the national average, actually at roughly half. And then 4 bedrooms are at about the national average. Now, 4 bedrooms across the country do tend to have a little bit higher vacancy rate. But overall, Moscow is doing fantastic in terms of vacancy rate. We have more than enough room to absorb the beds that we have planned coming on the market and stay well below the national average. So if we look at Pullman, if we'll just ignore 3 bedrooms for just one moment, I'll explain that in just a second. But Pullman as well, it runs well below the national average in terms of vacancy rates with 1s, 2s, and 4s running well below the average. Now, I left studios off, both Moscow and Pullman, only because the vacancy rate on all studios is 0. We have no vacancies in the studio apartments that we currently have. So what's going on with the 3 bedrooms in Pullman? Well, in Pullman, we have far fewer property owners sharing information with us. So if 1 or 2 of those property owners are struggling with their 3 bedrooms, they're going to show up disproportionately in our data set. So in talking with local property owners who don't share information with us to try and get my arms around that number or these numbers, it's my understanding that if we had a broader base of information coming in, we'd be much closer to 5 or 6% on vacancy on the 3 bedrooms. So still maybe a little bit of a soft spot in the Pullman market for 3 bedrooms, but nowhere near what our data reflects here. So let's discuss rents. So in 2016, the average rent per bed was roughly $616. Now on the Palouse, we actually average very close to that. When developers are looking at properties in our area, they generally will use the figure of between $595 for Moscow and $600, maybe a little bit higher in Pullman. So as we've had this supply come online, we've done a good job nationally of absorbing it, and we've continued to see rent increases, which means that demand is still there and that we are not in an oversupply situation. So let's look at rents in Moscow. So we're having a little bit of trouble reading that. But the thing that's really interesting about our rent increases in Moscow is I frequently hear from property owners, oh, well, we don't ever have any rent increases. Well, the truth is, if you do the math, going back to 2014, we actually have a higher average percent rent increase than the national average. We're closer to somewhere between 4 to 5% in Moscow. You do see a little bit of softening in 2017 for 3-bedroom units and 4 remaining steady, which also reflects a national trend related to 3-bedroom units and 4-bedroom units. The demand is really focused at this point in studios 1s and 2s. So if we look at Pullman, here again we have percent increases that are much higher than the national average, and Pullman is actually experiences higher rent increases than in Moscow, somewhere closer to 6% on average. We do not have data for 4 bedrooms running back, but it is my understanding that that number has remained fairly stable going back even as far as 2012. So moving forward, what can we expect? Well, nationally the trend is that the number of beds being delivered has plateaued. It's not begun to decline, but it's remained steady and evened out for several reasons, and 2 what I'd like to focus on. 1 is lack of prime locations. So there's been a lot of research done by student housing development firms looking at the prime locations, and it's been found that a location that's at least within 1 mile of central business district and 1 mile of campus will experience the largest rent increases over time. So the number of locations available that are in that sweet spot are very limited. As they've begun to roll out across the country, most of those have been snapped up. And the other trend that's starting to kind of slow the number of beds coming on is universities attempting to compete with off-campus housing, as we see with the Corporate Point and the WSU joint venture. So they've really started to step up the pace with which they're offering units that are competitive with what's offered in the market. So one trend that we're starting to see nationally, and we are starting to experience here on the Palouse, is we've had all of these new beds rolled out across the country. Well, that's put pressure on B and C class properties to raise the bar. So there are very active several REITs, private capital groups that are pursuing plays where they purchase a B and C property, reposition it, and then resell it for profit. So we have already started to see this on the Palouse with Harrison Street's purchase of the Grove properties and JSW's purchase of Cougar Ridge. So this is very much an opportunity if you are a local property owner and you own 2 or 3 properties or a large number of beds to start thinking about potentially your next move, either in upgrading what you currently have or potentially taking some profit and moving out of those units. Because we do have a very active market currently for B and C class units. So just to sum up, student housing as an investment class is very strong, and the expectation is that it will continue to be strong, backed with increased enrollments with international students and as the tail end of millennials continue to come to school. And there is a very high investor appetite for this investment class currently. With that, I'll answer any questions.
That's a lot of information.
Are you seeing any redevelopment of properties that don't fit the students' taste? You're talking about 1 bedroom for multiple youth.
I'm sorry, I only heard the first part of your question.
Well, our assessor says that you can see values dropping on those properties that only have like 1 bedroom for several individuals. Are you seeing redevelopment happening in those where they're changing those around or remodeling?
Yeah, across the country, as a matter of fact, there are some creative ideas to restructure those. It's really tricky in terms of development, hitting the mix. First of all, you're constrained by what you can build in terms of square footage in the city's constraints. And so many times that will dictate the type of unit that's built as much as the current taste. So developers are getting really creative with the way that they're trying to configure that. There's several concepts out there currently that allow for units to be built that can be reconfigured. So they have a basic floor plan of say, a 4-bedroom, but they have mobile walls that can be put in place and to meet the demand from students. So you are seeing definitely some creative concepts come to the market to help fit that demand.
Justin, do you have any information about the range of prices? In other words, is there instead of $600 a bed is $400 a bed versus something that's $800 a bed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a fairly extensive database that covers, all rental ranges. This is just really a summation of that information.
So it's just the average.
Right. So we've just averaged those, but when we collect information from individual property owners, we definitely find a large range within the market. And we do have a lot of B and C level, even some D level apartments in our market. So we see a very large breadth of rental rates depending on age and class of the product.
That's what I want.
Yep.
Thank you, Justin.